Helen pointed at the church steps, her eyes wide with astonishment. "Edward, she looks exactly like your late sister." The wealthy businessman looked in the indicated direction and felt his legs weaken. The nun looked up and recognized him instantly. What escaped her lips made his world crumble and be reborn all at once. Her full name was Sister Beatrice Miller, though few in the small town of Harmony Creek, North Carolina, knew her last name or her origins. To everyone there, she was simply the kind nun who had arrived 15 years ago, fragile and seeking refuge, but who had transformed into the spiritual mother of an entire community. That Saturday afternoon, she was sitting on the steps of the century-old St. Francis Church, organizing donated clothes she would distribute to the needy the next day, when her life changed completely for the second time. Edward Miller walked casually through the main square beside his fiancée Helen, enjoying the late afternoon on their early honeymoon. He owned one of the largest corporate groups in the nation, a 42-year-old man who had achieved everything money could buy, but who carried a wound in his heart that had never fully healed. Helen, a successful 35-year-old architect, was admiring the colonial architecture of the small town when something overwhelmingly caught her eye. Helen pointed at the church steps, her eyes wide with astonishment, her voice trembling with disbelief. She said she couldn't believe what she was seeing, that the woman sitting there looked exactly like someone very important from Edward's past. The magnate followed his fiancée's gaze and felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. For a moment, he thought he was hallucinating, that the travel fatigue was playing tricks on his mind. The nun slowly lifted her eyes, and when their gazes met, time seemed to stop. 15 years of separation dissolved in an instant. Beatrice immediately recognized her brother's eyes, those same eyes that had once looked at her with disappointment and resentment during their last argument. Edward saw in her eyes the same sweetness as always, but also a serenity that hadn't been there before, a peace he had never managed to find in all his pursuit of success. Beatrice slowly stood up, the donated clothes falling from her lap, and murmured her brother's name in a voice he hadn't heard in over a decade. Edward felt tears well up in his eyes, unable to control them, and his voice failed when he tried to respond. Helen watched the scene without fully understanding what was happening, but realizing she was witnessing something extraordinary and transformative. The reunion happened in silence for long seconds, two siblings looking at each other across the chasm of years of separation, pain, and regret. Edward took a hesitant step forward, as if fearing she would disappear again. Beatrice remained motionless, torn between the joy of seeing her brother and the fear of reliving the pain that had brought her there. The surrounding square seemed to have emptied, and even the birds seemed to have fallen silent before the magnitude of that moment. Helen finally understood what was happening when Edward whispered his sister's name with an emotion she had never seen in him before. It was as if all the pieces of a puzzle clicked into place at once, revealing a truth that would transform not only that moment, but the rest of their lives. The nun they thought was a stranger was, in fact, the sister Edward believed he had lost forever, the person whose absence had shaped his entire life's trajectory. Beatrice had arrived in Harmony Creek, North Carolina, on a rainy night 15 years ago, carrying only a small suitcase and a broken heart. She was, at the time, a 22-year-old who had just abandoned a life of privilege after a devastating family argument over the division of their parents' inheritance. Edward, then 27, and already showing boundless ambition for business, had argued that she should sell her share of the family company and pursue her dreams of social work elsewhere. The argument had started like so many others, but escalated to irreversible proportions when Edward said she was being naive for wanting to transform part of the company into social projects. Beatrice felt misunderstood and rejected, especially when other family members supported her brother's position, arguing that business and charity didn't mix. On that terrible night, she had screamed that she would rather live without the family's money than be part of something she considered cold and inhumane. She left the next day, leaving behind not only the fortune, but also the only brother she truly loved. During her first months in Harmony Creek, North Carolina, Beatrice worked in a small bakery to support herself, while battling depression and a sense of abandonment. It was Father Michael, the parish priest of St. Francis Church, who welcomed her and helped her find purpose again. He recognized in her a genuine vocation to serve others and guided her on her spiritual journey. Gradually, Beatrice discovered that her true calling was to help the most needy in the community. She organized adult literacy groups, created a community garden that fed dozens of families, and established a basic medical assistance program for those who couldn't afford treatment. Her university degree in business administration, ironically the same field Edward dominated in the corporate world, proved fundamental for organizing and managing these social projects efficiently. The contrast between her former and current life was striking. Where before there were high heels and designer dresses, now there were simple sandals and the modest habit of the Franciscan sisters. Where before there were dinners in expensive restaurants, now there were shared meals with people who often had nothing to eat. Where before there was the comfort of a mansion, now there was a small room in the convent, furnished only with the essentials. But Beatrice had discovered something all the money in the world couldn't buy. The inner peace that comes from knowing her life had a greater purpose. Throughout all those years, she had wondered countless times if Edward missed her, if he had tried to find her, if he understood the reasons that led her to leave. There were moments when she almost returned home, especially when she learned of her parents passing through distant acquaintances. But she always concluded that her family had made their choice, preferring business over people, and that she wouldn't be welcomed back. The community of Harmony Creek, North Carolina, had adopted her as their own, and she had become a respected and beloved figure by all. Children called her Aunt B, the elderly considered her a saint, and needy families knew they could always count on her help in difficult times. She had created a network of solidarity that had transformed the lives of hundreds of people, proving to herself that it was possible to make a difference in the world without needing a lot of money. That afternoon, upon seeing Edward again, all those memories flooded back at once. It was as if the 15 years of separation had been compressed into a few seconds, bringing back both the pain of departure and the love that had always existed between them, but which had been buried by misunderstandings and wounded pride on both sides. Edward felt his legs tremble when he finally fully processed what he was seeing. His sister, the one he had searched for tirelessly for years, was there before him, alive and radiant with a peace he had never managed to find. Helen held his arm firmly, realizing he needed physical and emotional support in that transformative moment. The businessman who led meetings with hundreds of people and made decisions that moved millions of dollars was completely vulnerable, like a lost child who had finally found his way home. Childhood memories began to flood his mind like a torrent. He remembered Sundays when they played together in the family garden, when Beatrice invented fantastic stories about princesses who saved wounded dragons instead of fleeing from them. She had always been different, more sensitive, more concerned with the well-being of others than with material possessions. Even as a child, she already showed a natural empathy that impressed him, and secretly made him feel inadequate for not possessing the same ease in connecting with people. Edward recalled how Beatrice used to defend him when their parents criticized him for being too focused on studies and not very sociable. She was his greatest defender and his best friend, the only person in the family who truly understood him and accepted his peculiarities. When she turned 18 and declared that she wanted to use part of the family inheritance to create social projects, he should have supported her dreams instead of trying to mold her to the business standards he considered more practical and secure. The weight of guilt Edward had carried all those years intensified before the sight of his sister. He remembered the harsh words he had said in that last argument, when he called her a dreamer and told her she needed to mature and face the reality of the business world. At the time, he thought he was being a protective brother, trying to prepare her for a world he considered cruel and competitive. He never imagined his words would be interpreted as rejection and that she would leave the next day without a trace. Helen observed the transformation happening on Edward's face as he looked at his sister. She had known a successful, determined, and confident man, but she also perceived a melancholy in him that he could never fully explain. During their courtship, Edward had mentioned his sister several times, always with a deep sadness in his voice, saying that she had left after a family disagreement and had never been heard from again. Helen now understood that loss had completely shaped the personality of the man she had chosen to marry. Edward took another step toward his sister, and his voice was choked as he tried to speak. He said that he had spent all those years looking for her, that he had hired private detectives, that he had visited dozens of cities, that he had never stopped hoping she would come home. Beatrice looked at him with a mixture of surprise and emotion, as if she couldn't believe she had actually been sought and that her absence had been felt. Helen realized she was witnessing something much greater than a simple family reunion. She saw two siblings who loved each other deeply but had been lost in misunderstandings and pride. Edward had always spoken of his sister as someone special, different from everyone he knew, and now Helen understood what that meant. Beatrice emanated a serenity and kindness that were palpable, an inner light that illuminated not only her own face, but also touched everyone around her. The businessman she knew was unraveling before her eyes, revealing a vulnerable and regretful man who had spent half his life trying to compensate for a mistake he had made in his youth. Helen felt her heart fill with compassion, not only for Edward, but also for Beatrice, who had clearly suffered as much as her brother during all those years of separation. She understood that she was about to witness a transformation that would forever change the lives of everyone involved in that story of sibling love that had resisted time and distance. Beatrice took a deep breath before she began to speak, her voice soft but laden with contained emotion. She said that throughout all those years, she had wondered if Edward truly cared about her departure, if he had understood that she wasn't rejecting the family, but rather seeking a path where she could live according to her deepest values. The nun explained that on that terrible night, when he had said she needed to be more practical and less of a dreamer, she felt as if her truest essence was being denied and devalued. She recounted that the decision to leave had not been made out of anger, but out of a profound sadness at not feeling understood by the only person whose opinion truly mattered to her. Beatrice revealed that Edward had always been her childhood hero, the intelligent and determined older brother she admired immensely, and so his words had a devastating impact on her young heart. When he suggested she sell her share of the inheritance and pursue her dreams elsewhere, she interpreted that as an invitation to leave his life definitively. Beatrice's spiritual journey had begun not as an escape from the world, but as a search for meaning and purpose. She described her first years in Harmony Creek, North Carolina, as a period of profound reflection and inner healing. Father Michael had become her spiritual mentor, helping her channel her pain into compassion for others and her sense of rejection into a mission of welcoming the rejected of society. Through working with the needy, she had discovered that her true calling was to be a bridge between different worlds, someone who could understand both privilege and poverty. Beatrice explained that her work in the community had expanded far beyond what she had initially imagined. She coordinated a program that provided microloans for local women entrepreneurs, taught sustainable agriculture techniques to small farmers, and had established a partnership with volunteer doctors who visited the town monthly to treat those who couldn't travel to larger medical centers. Her business administration degree, which Edward had considered wasted on social projects, proved fundamental for structuring and expanding these initiatives efficiently and sustainably. The personal transformation she had experienced over the years was evident not only in her words, but in her entire demeanor. Beatrice had learned to find joy in small daily victories, a child learning to read, a family managing to increase their income through the microloan program, an elderly person receiving medical care they thought they could never afford. She had discovered that true wealth was not in accumulating possessions, but in multiplying opportunities for others to prosper. Helen listened, fascinated, as Beatrice described her daily routine. She woke before dawn for communal prayer, then visited needy families, coordinated volunteer activities, organized received donations, and ended the day teaching in adult literacy courses. It was a life of purpose and fulfillment that contrasted drastically with the empty hustle and bustle many people experienced in pursuit of material success. Beatrice looked directly into Edward's eyes and said she had never stopped loving him, but that she had learned to accept that perhaps they were destined to live completely different lives. She recounted that in the early years she prayed every night for him to look for her, but that she had gradually made peace with the possibility that it might be better for both of them to go their separate ways. The serenity with which she spoke of this acceptance impressed Helen, who realized she was in the presence of a person who had transformed pain into wisdom and resentment into inner peace. Edward listened to every word with a mixture of admiration and remorse, finally understanding the depth of the transformation his sister had experienced and recognizing in her the extraordinary person she had always been, but whom he hadn't fully seen when they were younger. Edward wiped the tears from his face and began to tell his own version of those 15 years of separation, his voice revealing a vulnerability Helen had rarely witnessed. He explained that the search for Beatrice had begun the day after her departure, when he woke up and discovered she had left only a note saying she needed to find her own path in the world. The young businessman had immediately realized he had made a terrible mistake trying to mold his sister to his own standards of success. He described the first years as a period of desperate search and growing guilt. Edward had hired private detectives, placed ads in newspapers in various cities, personally visited dozens of places where he thought she might have gone. Each false lead was like a stab to his heart, and each passing month without news intensified his certainty that he had lost the most important person in his life due to his own stubbornness and lack of understanding. Edward revealed that all the business success he had achieved over the years was, in fact, a way to honor his sister's memory and an attempt to become worthy of her forgiveness should she ever return. He recounted that he had created a secret fund, equivalent to her share of the inheritance, which grew year after year with the returns from his investments. This money was waiting for her, untouched, as a way to demonstrate that he had never given up hope of finding her again. The businessman shared that he had learned, in the most painful way possible, that the true value of people was not in their ability to generate profit, but in their ability to generate love and meaning. He admitted that he had spent years trying to fill the void left by her absence with material achievements, but that nothing could replace the genuine connection that existed between them. Edward explained that every important business decision was made, thinking about what Beatrice would approve of, as if she were his invisible moral conscience. Helen watched in admiration as Edward transformed when talking about his sister. The practical and calculating man she knew revealed an emotional depth and capacity for love that completely surprised her. She now understood why he had always been so generous with social causes, why he insisted on ethical business policies even when it reduced profits, and why he showed an inexplicable sadness even in moments of greatest professional success. Edward said he had established social responsibility programs in all his companies, always wondering if Beatrice would be proud of what he was building. He recounted that he discreetly financed dozens of social projects across the country, hoping that somehow these acts of kindness would reach her and she would know he had learned from his own mistakes. Every charitable act was a way of conversing with his absent sister, of showing that he had finally understood what she had tried to teach him years before. The businessman revealed that he had created an institute in his parents' name, dedicated to educational and community development projects, and that he had always imagined that one day he could invite her to lead this initiative. Edward explained that he had learned that true success was not in accumulating wealth, but in using that wealth to create opportunities and hope for other people, exactly as Beatrice had always advocated. Edward gently held his sister's hands and said he had never stopped loving her, that she had always been his inspiration and his conscience, even in her absence. He asked for forgiveness for having been so limited in his worldview when they were young, for not having understood that she was not being naive, but visionary. Edward admitted that it had taken him years to develop the wisdom she already naturally possessed at 22. Helen felt her heart swell as she witnessed Edward's raw sincerity and the way Beatrice listened to him with compassion and understanding. It was evident that the love between them had never diminished. It had merely been buried by misunderstandings and pride. She realized she was witnessing not just a family reunion, but the healing of two souls who had carried unnecessary wounds for too long. Beatrice took a few steps back, her hands trembling slightly as she processed everything Edward had revealed. The resistance that formed in her eyes was not coldness, but rather the self-defense mechanism of someone who had learned to live with pain and now feared reopening wounds she considered healed. She said she needed time to process it all, that 15 years of separation could not be healed in a single conversation, no matter how emotional it was. The nun explained that she had built a new identity in Harmony Creek, North Carolina, and that her life now belonged to the community, that had welcomed her when she needed it most. Beatrice recounted that she had responsibilities and commitments to people who depended on her daily, and that she couldn't simply abandon everything to resume a life she had left behind so long ago. She expressed fear that perhaps it was too late to rebuild their sibling relationship, that perhaps they had become too different to truly reconnect. Edward tried to argue, but Beatrice gently raised her hand, asking him to understand her perspective. She said that throughout all those years, she had learned that words could be beautiful, but only consistent actions demonstrated true intentions. Experience had taught her to be cautious with promises and passionate declarations, preferring to observe behavior over time before fully trusting someone. At that moment, several people from the community began to approach, curious about the presence of the elegant visitors talking with their beloved sister Beatrice. Mrs. Mary, a 70-year-old woman who sold sweets in the square, approached concerned and asked if everything was all right. A group of teenagers participating in Beatrice's education program also joined the group, demonstrating the affectionate concern they had for the nun. Helen watched fascinated as the local community protected Beatrice as if she were a precious treasure. It was evident that she had become a maternal figure for many people, and that her positive influence extended far beyond the formal activities of the convent. People spoke of her with a respect and affection that revealed the profound impact she had made on their lives over the years. Edward realized he would need to demonstrate his intentions through actions, not just words. He looked at the assembled community and understood that any attempt to win her back should include and respect the people she had chosen as her family. The businessman felt a mixture of pride and humility, seeing how his sister had become a respected and beloved leader, exactly the kind of person she had always wanted to be. Father Michael approached the group, drawn by the commotion, and Beatrice quickly introduced him as her spiritual mentor. The priest, a wise 60-year-old man, immediately perceived the emotional tension of the situation and offered his church as a quiet place where they could talk without the community's curiosity. Edward gratefully accepted the offer, recognizing that he needed to respect Beatrice's pace and the environment she considered safe. Helen held Edward's arm, offering silent support as she observed the complex dynamic unfolding. She perceived that Beatrice was not being cruel or vengeful, but rather protecting her own heart and honoring the commitments she had made to her adopted community. The architect admired the nun's integrity, who was unwilling to abandon her responsibilities even in the face of possible family reconciliation. Edward began to understand that regaining his sister's trust would be a gradual process requiring patience, humility, and concrete demonstrations that he had truly changed. He realized that Beatrice had become an even more extraordinary person than she was in her youth, and that any future relationship between them would have to honor and include the life she had built for herself in Harmony Creek, North Carolina. Inside the silent church, illuminated only by softly flickering candles, the three sat on the old wooden pews, while Father Michael discreetly withdrew to give them privacy. The sacred atmosphere seemed conducive to soul-touching conversations, and both Edward and Beatrice felt that this was the right place to begin the true healing of their old wounds. Helen remained in respectful silence, understanding that her presence as a witness was important, but that the words should come from the two siblings. Beatrice was the first to break the silence, her voice echoing softly through the century-old walls. She said she had spent years harboring resentment and bitterness, but that her spiritual journey had taught her that carrying such feelings was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. The nun explained that she had forgiven Edward a long time ago, not because he had asked for forgiveness, but because she needed that inner peace to adequately serve her community. Edward felt a wave of relief and emotion upon hearing these words, but also understood that forgiveness didn't automatically erase the years of separation and the wounds caused. He said he needed her forgiveness not only to alleviate his own guilt, but primarily to build a new relationship based on mutual respect and a true understanding of who they had become over the years. The businessman admitted that he had idealized the reunion so much that he wasn't prepared to discover she had become an even more incredible person than he remembered. Beatrice smiled for the first time since they had recognized each other, and in that smile Edward saw again the loving sister of his youth. She said that he too had changed, that she could perceive in his eyes a depth and wisdom that hadn't existed before, and that his words revealed a man who had learned important lessons about what truly mattered in life. The nun confessed that she had always wondered if Edward had become cold and calculating over the years, and that she felt relieved to discover he had developed a social conscience and generosity she hadn't expected to find. The process of mutual forgiveness began to happen naturally, as if years of resentment were dissolving in the sacred atmosphere of the church. Edward asked for forgiveness, not only for his harsh words in the past, but for his lack of vision and for trying to mold his sister to his own limited standards. Beatrice asked for forgiveness for leaving without giving him the opportunity to better understand her motivations and for having assumed he wouldn't care about her absence. Helen watched emotionally as two siblings rediscovered each other, not as the people they were in the past, but as the people they had become through different but equally valid paths. She perceived that Edward was getting to know a more mature and wise version of Beatrice, while Beatrice discovered that Edward had developed a social conscience and sensitivity she hadn't imagined he possessed. Edward recounted the sleepless nights he spent questioning if he had made the right choices in life, and how her absence had been a constant reminder that success without love and genuine human connections was empty and meaningless. Beatrice shared that there were moments when she missed her brother's intelligent conversation and peculiar sense of humor, and that she had prayed for him to find true happiness, even if it was far from her. The reconciliation didn't happen dramatically, but rather as a gradual and mutual acceptance that both had made mistakes, both had suffered, and both had grown as people through that painful experience. Edward understood that Beatrice no longer needed his protection or guidance, that she had become an independent and accomplished woman who deserved his respect and admiration. Beatrice recognized that Edward had become a man of principles who used his influence to do good in the world, exactly as she had always hoped would happen. Helen felt her own heart fill with hope as she witnessed that transformation. She was seeing not only the healing of a family relationship, but also the demonstration that true love can withstand time, distance, and misunderstandings when there is a genuine basis of affection and mutual respect. The next day, Beatrice invited Edward and Helen to personally see the work she was developing in the community, an opportunity she rarely offered to external visitors. It was her way of sharing not only her activities, but the essence of who she had become during all those years of dedication to others. Edward woke early, anxious and nervous, knowing that day would be decisive for truly understanding the life his sister had built for herself. The first stop was the community garden Beatrice had helped create on land donated by the City Hall. The site had been transformed from a vacant lot into a source of food and income for 40 local families. Edward was impressed by the project's organization. There were well-planned garden beds, an efficient irrigation system, a small greenhouse for seedlings, and even a composting area where the city's organic waste was transformed into natural fertilizer. Beatrice explained that she had studied sustainable agriculture techniques through books and online courses, applying her business administration knowledge to make the project economically viable. Helen watched fascinated as Beatrice interacted with the people working in the garden. It was evident that she was not just a distant coordinator, but someone who got her hands dirty, who knew each family by name, who cared about the personal problems of each community member. A woman named Mrs. Rose recounted that she had managed to increase her family income by 60% by selling organic produce she cultivated in her garden plot, and that her grandchildren now ate fresh vegetables every day. The second stop was the literacy center that operated in a room provided by the public school. Edward saw his sister teaching a group of 15 adults, some already elderly, who had never had the opportunity to learn to read and write. The patience and care with which she treated each student deeply moved him. A 65-year-old man named John proudly showed a note he had written to his wife, the first thing he could write by himself in his entire life. Edward realized that Beatrice was not just teaching letters and numbers, but restoring dignity and self-esteem to people whom society had left behind. The most impactful moment was when they visited the microloan program Beatrice had created with local donations and some personal savings. The program had helped 17 women open small businesses, a bakery, a beauty salon, a used clothing store, a sewing service, among others. Edward found a genuine entrepreneurial energy that surprised him. Determined women who had transformed small loans into prosperous businesses that supported their families and generated jobs for other people in the community. Edward talked at length with several program beneficiaries and was impressed by the success rate of the ventures and the extremely low default rate on the loans. Beatrice had applied rigorous but fair criteria, offering not only money but also business guidance and continuous monitoring. It was a model of community development that worked sustainably and replicably, demonstrating that she had developed management skills that rivaled his own. During lunch at a small local diner, Edward couldn't hide his admiration and emotion. He said he had visited social projects funded by his companies in several cities across the country, but that he had never seen anything as well structured and efficient as Beatrice's work. The businessman confessed that he was surprised and humbled by the administrative capacity and strategic vision she had developed, applying solid business principles to social causes much more effectively than many organizations he knew. Helen saw Edward transform with each passing hour, getting to know his sister-in-law's work. The businessman was discovering that Beatrice had not wasted her education or her potential, but rather had found a way to apply her talents in a manner that generated real impact on people's lives. Edward understood that his sister had become exactly the kind of leader he had always admired, someone who could combine technical competence with human compassion, administrative efficiency with social justice. By the end of the day, Edward was convinced that Beatrice had found her true calling and that she was doing extraordinary work that deserved not only his respect, but also his unconditional support. That night, Edward requested a private meeting with Beatrice in the convent garden, under the stars that softly illuminated the tranquil setting. He had spent the entire day reflecting on everything he had seen and was ready to make a proposal that had been germinating in his heart since the moment of their reunion. Helen remained at the hotel, understanding that this was a moment that needed to happen only between the two siblings, but sending her positive energy and prayers for everything to go well. Edward began by saying that he had finally understood that Beatrice didn't need rescue or salvation, but that perhaps he could offer resources to amplify the extraordinary work she was already doing. The businessman proposed creating a foundation that would provide financial and technical support for the social projects in Harmony Creek, North Carolina, allowing them to expand and serve as a model for other communities. He emphasized that he didn't want to take control or change the essence of her work, but rather to provide the necessary resources so she could reach even more needy people. Beatrice listened to the proposal in silence, carefully evaluating not only the words but also the intentions behind them. She said she needed guarantees that her autonomy would be respected and that the humanist philosophy guiding her work would not be compromised by pressures for quantitative results or the pursuit of financial return. The nun explained that she had seen many genuine social initiatives corrupted when money became more important than the people being served. Edward assured her that the foundation would be structured to ensure she maintained full control over operational decisions and that the values guiding her work were preserved. He proposed creating an advisory board composed of members from the community of Harmony Creek, North Carolina, ensuring that any expansion respected local needs and characteristics. The businessman said he had learned that the true success of social projects came from genuine community involvement, not from external impositions. The proposal included not only financial resources, but also access to technical expertise in areas such as sustainable agriculture, adult education, microloan management, and community development. Edward explained that his companies had developed partnerships with universities and specialized organizations that could offer consulting and training to further enhance the project's impact. He emphasized that everything would be offered as support, never as an imposition, always respecting the wisdom and experience Beatrice had accumulated. Beatrice felt touched by the sensitivity with which Edward had structured his proposal, recognizing in it genuine respect for her work and her autonomy. She said she could consider the partnership if it was clear that the goal was to better serve the community, not to satisfy the conscience of those donating money. The nun explained that she had refused offers of help in the past when she perceived that donors were more interested in feeling good about themselves than in truly understanding and supporting the community's needs. Edward confessed that his initial motivation had been partially selfish, a way to redeem himself for the years of separation, but that after learning about her work, he understood it was something much greater than his own need for forgiveness. He said he had been genuinely impressed by the efficiency and impact of the projects, and that he saw a real opportunity to create a replicable model of community development that could benefit thousands of people in similar situations. The conversation stretched for hours, with both exploring practical and philosophical details of the potential partnership. Beatrice gradually became convinced that Edward had truly matured and developed a genuine understanding of social development. Edward was impressed by the depth of his sister's strategic thinking and her ability to anticipate problems and propose creative solutions. By the end of the night, Beatrice accepted the proposal, but set clear conditions. The local community should be consulted and approve any changes. She would maintain total autonomy over operational decisions, and any expansion should happen gradually, always prioritizing quality over quantity. Edward accepted all conditions with joy, understanding that he had not only regained his sister, but also found an extraordinary partner for work that would give true meaning to all his wealth. 6 months later, the transformation in Harmony Creek, North Carolina, was visible and inspiring. The Beatrice Miller Foundation had been officially established with a board of directors composed of local community members, Edward, and 2 social development specialists recommended by Father Michael. Beatrice maintained her position as general coordinator of all projects, but now had resources and technical support that allowed her to reach many more families and implement initiatives that were once just distant dreams. The community garden had expanded into a sustainable agriculture center that served not only Harmony Creek, North Carolina, but also 3 neighboring towns. Beatrice had developed a multiplier program where the most experienced farmers taught sustainable techniques to new participants, creating a self-sustaining knowledge network. Edward was always moved whenever he visited the site and saw how his sister had managed to combine business efficiency with human warmth, creating an environment where people felt valued both as producers and as individuals. The literacy program had become a continuing education center that offered everything from basic literacy to vocational courses in partnership with the local community college. Helen, who had become a regular visitor to Harmony Creek, North Carolina, had contributed her architectural knowledge to design a new headquarters for the educational center, a sustainable building that had become a source of pride for the entire community. The architectural design respected local characteristics while incorporating modern rainwater harvesting and solar energy technologies. The microloan program had evolved into a community credit union that served not only local entrepreneurs, but also offered basic financial products to families who had never had access to the traditional banking system. Beatrice had studied international community banking models and adapted best practices to the local reality, creating a solid financial institution committed to the region's development. The success rate of the financed ventures remained impressively high, demonstrating that when people receive real opportunities, they tend to prosper. Edward had learned much more than he had taught throughout this entire process. He began visiting Harmony Creek, North Carolina, at least once a month, always accompanied by Helen, who had fallen in love with the community and her sister-in-law's work. The businessman discovered that he could apply many of the lessons learned from Beatrice to his own companies, developing more efficient and authentic social responsibility programs. He had understood that true business success was not just about generating profit, but about creating genuine value for all involved parties. The relationship between the siblings had strengthened in a way neither of them had imagined possible. They discovered that the separation, though painful, had allowed each to develop their own unique strengths and perspectives, making them complementary partners rather than just siblings. Edward admired Beatrice's practical wisdom and social sensitivity, while she respected his strategic capability and his determination to make things happen. Helen had found in Beatrice not just a sister-in-law, but a spiritual mentor who inspired her to rethink her own priorities in life. The architect had begun dedicating part of her time to social housing projects, applying her technical knowledge to create dignified housing solutions for low-income families. Beatrice's example had shown that it was possible to use professional talents to generate significant social impact without sacrificing technical excellence. Edward and Helen's wedding had been celebrated in Harmony Creek, North Carolina, at St. Francis Church, with Father Michael officiating the ceremony. It was a simple but deeply emotional celebration, where the entire community gathered to celebrate not only the couple's union, but also the reunification of the Miller family. Beatrice had been the maid of honor, a moment that perfectly symbolized how family love had been restored and strengthened. Edward had discovered that recovering his sister meant much more than healing a past wound. It meant finding a greater purpose for his life and his resources. Beatrice had found not only the family reconciliation she had secretly always desired, but also a partner who could amplify her social impact without compromising her values. Together, they were creating a model of community development that inspired other initiatives across the country and demonstrated that it is possible to combine business competence with human compassion to create real and lasting changes in people's lives. 2 years after the reunion, Edward was sitting on the same park bench where he had first seen Beatrice, but now the scene was completely different. Helen was by his side, 6 months pregnant with a girl they would name Hope Beatrice, a tribute to the aunt who had taught them both about the true meaning of wealth and purpose in life. The square was more bustling, more prosperous, a reflection of the development that had come to the town through the projects coordinated by his sister. Beatrice approached, walking calmly, coming from the weekly meeting of the credit union board, carrying a folder full of reports and an expression of satisfaction that Edward had learned to recognize as a sign that another family had significantly improved their quality of life. She greeted her brother and sister-in-law with the genuine affection that had become natural between them and sat down to share the week's news. Edward looked at his sister and marveled again at the extraordinary journey they had traveled together. He had learned that true success was not in conquering markets or accumulating wealth, but in using his talents and resources to create real opportunities for other people to prosper. The Beatrice Miller Foundation had become a national model for community development, attracting visitors from various parts of the country who wanted to learn and replicate the methodologies developed there. Beatrice recounted that she had received an invitation to present her work at an international sustainable development conference, an honor she had decided to accept because it could inspire similar initiatives worldwide. Edward smiled proudly, remembering how he had tried to limit her to conventional business standards years before, without understanding that she was destined to be a pioneer in much more significant ways of creating social impact. Helen watched the two siblings converse and felt grateful to be part of that family who had learned to transform wounds into wisdom and separation into an even stronger union. She knew that her daughter would grow up surrounded by extraordinary examples of how it's possible to live a life of purpose and meaning, how it's possible to use privileges to serve others, how it's possible to transform pain into compassion and individual success into collective prosperity. The afternoon fell softly over Harmony Creek, North Carolina, as the three walked together through the town that had become a symbol of hope and renewal. Children played in the revitalized square, merchants closed their prosperous businesses, students left the evening courses at the educational center, and families gathered in their homes knowing that the next day would bring new opportunities for growth and prosperity. Edward now understood that the reunion with Beatrice had been much more than recovering a lost sister. It had been discovering his own humanity and finding the true reason for his existence. He had learned that wealth only had value when it was shared, that success only had meaning when it benefited other people, and that family love was capable of overcoming any obstacle when there was a genuine will to forgive and start anew. Beatrice looked at the starry sky and silently gave thanks for all the winding paths that had led her to that moment of fulfillment. She had discovered that she had never truly been lost. She was just following a different path that would prepare her to reunite with her family in an even deeper and more meaningful way. The love that united them now was more mature, more conscious, more generous than anything they could have imagined in their youth.